I've always found the book of Revelations a bit puzzling, if not absolutely bizarre. You know, if you read it, they're spinning things with multiple eyes that watch people, and these figures on horses, just like in the Lord of the Rings, you know, riding on the dark horses and all these kinds of things. It is a book that's been placed by scholars among the genre or the category of apocalyptic literature. You know, we have psalms or songs, we have proverbs, we have history, we have things classified as myth. In the Bible, this is the category of apocalyptic, meaning the end of time. And it sits in that category alongside Ezekiel and Daniel. Well, if you've ever looked at it, how many people have tried to make sense out of Revelation? Anybody? Did you get very far? Me either. It's elusive to most scholars, but it's ripe for Hollywood. You know, how many movies are about the end of time and aliens invading or something going on, or this young girl whose head spins all around as they exorcise the demons within her? It's that kind of stuff. It makes for good movies. But even the best of scholars struggle with it. Oh, there are preachers who, over the decades and centuries, have claimed to break some kind of code that revealed to them the specific date, time, the when, where, and the how that the end of the world would take place. The last battle between good and evil would occur. Christ against the Antichrist. Like the bestseller Hal Lindsey wrote in the early 70s. It was called The Late Great Planet Earth. And he made some very, very bold predictions, naming the when, where, and how of Armageddon, the last battle. And curiously enough, maybe he did get this one right, he said that Russia was the Antichrist. I don't know, it comes to mind these days. But anyway, all these predictions that have been made over time, they've all been wrong. You know, in the first century, there are stories of Christians going out to the mountaintops, believing that it's going to happen any day, and certainly that didn't happen. And many since have tried to do that. Do you know where the word Armageddon, do you know what Armageddon is? Anybody besides Bruce Willis movie? Anybody know what Armageddon is? Armageddon's the name of the last battle in history and time that would be between the good and the bad and end it all. And it's kind of interesting where that word comes from, because it's a mistranslation, actually. There is a valley, the Sidon Valley in Israel, that runs from the coastline of the Mediterranean. It runs all the way through, it ends somewhere between, well, it ends actually at the Sea of Galilee, but before that, between Nazareth and the city of Zephyrus. Anyway, when you ran through that low valley, the fertile valley, you could take the road south to Jerusalem or north towards Damascus. So it's a place of main transportation and an easy place to take horses, chariots, and wagons. And on one of the hills on the south side of that valley, looking down, is a fortress that was built before, it was built by Canaanites before Solomon took it over, and then first David, then Solomon, that overlooks that valley and sees all that has gone on there and still does. And that town, that fortress, is Megiddo. The archaeologist most tied to that taught at the University of South Florida. It is Megiddo, and in Hebrew it would be called Har Megiddo. Har Megiddo. And if you butcher the translation enough, it goes from Har to Arm, and Megiddo goes to Megiddon, and you get Armageddon. So they could not imagine, so many battles of magnitude had taken place there. The authors could not imagine the last battle taking place anywhere else. Okay. How many people know what Armageddon is? Confirmation 101. There we go. Okay. Nonetheless, this book of Revelation, having that sidebar, Revelation's provided food and fodder, not just for Hollywood, but for a lot of preachers. And it becomes very popular during difficult times, as you can imagine, when people look, even it pops into my mind when I think about, you watch the news with famine and with wars and with pandemics, all these things going on. Certainly Armageddon can fill a congregation if you use it a certain way. Nonetheless, it's a hard text, and Martin Luther once called it an epistle of straw. He did not think it should be in the Bible. But recently, respectable, world-famed, renowned scholars have made some headway, and I'll give you one example. We now know, let me try this one, how many have ever heard of 666? Because you saw the movie. Yeah. 666 stands for Nero. Nero is the Antichrist, we think, portrayed in this book. The dating fits, the chaos that's talked about, and the brutality described. You see, the number 66, which we have come to associate with the devil, coincides with Nero's name, because in the ancient world, both in the Roman and the Greek world, they had a way of writing called numerology, where letters had a numerical equivalent. And if you're a group of people who are persecuted by someone who likes to persecute you, you don't say bad things about them in their name out loud. And 666 or 616 in numerology spell Nero. So when you read that text, the evil one, the Antichrist, the one against God, is Nero. And it makes sense at that time. Nero was crazy. Not a lot more than some of the other Caesars, but he was nuts. Some surmise that his insanity came from drinking wine. So this is a warning to all you wine drinkers out there. And the reason is that the wine of Rome, the water that was used to make it, contained a high degree of mercury. And as I understand, if you drink enough water and a high level of mercury, it can lead to insanity. And of course, in the ancient world, wine was easier to get a hold of than water and very frequently used. So, like many of the Caesars, Nero was nuts, killed his mother, his wife, many others. And when this lowly, newfound, rising religious sect that had sprung out of Judaism that we know as Christianity began to kind of bubble up, he liked them as a target for some of his anger outbursts. In fact, when Rome burned, you've heard that phrase, Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Some think he let the city on fire for political reasons. He blamed the Christians. They took the fall. They became the scapegoat. Okay, now, if I bored you, I apologize. But I had to get through, I had to discard all the junk that's out there. The crazies who are trying to give you this is that and that is this as they read through the text, or the latest movie that talks about how the world ends with Arnold Schwarzenegger becoming the zapper of aliens or whatever. You know, we've all seen them, and they're kind of fun. And notice how popular they are. There is an obsession with the end of the world. But I had to wade through those to kind of toss them aside and name them because they don't apply here. They don't apply. What does apply, what's central to what I want to share with you, and I hope you take home, is that this disciple, this Apostle John, despite all the ugliness he saw around him, the persecutions, the power plays, the wars, the battles, the starvation, all the stuff he saw, despite that, he wanted us to know that in the end, when the last word is written and said, it will say, God wins. That's what he wants us to know. That's what he wants us to remember, that despite what we are in, the quagmire we feel, or the swirling elements we can't get a handle on, that if we stay the course and navigate the way we know we should, that in the end, generation upon generation and century upon century leads us to that point where God wins. You know, it's just that way. The dark, the evil, the grim of this world will be conquered, John says. And the dream begun in creation, the hope that comes to us in the stories found in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, come to fruition, and fruition even better in John's dream of the future. John says Jerusalem will be restored. And Jerusalem is not important here because we all know the city and its religious ties, but Jerusalem was believed by the Jews to be the starting point of creation. That it all sprung from that place on the Temple Mount, that was the center. And so when this new creation starts, Jerusalem will begin it. It will become a city unknown to us who make cities by hand. It will become a refuge and a sanctuary for anybody and everybody. It will be a city, the text says, where the lights never go off. And they don't go off because they don't run on electricity. They don't run on anything else like that. It says that God is so close that God becomes all the light we need. In fact, it says there won't be a temple, you won't need a church anymore, because we will so be in God and God will so surround us that God becomes the temple. That's an incredible image when you think about it. That we don't need those things that we make our own hands to somehow manifest the divine. We will be in the divine and the divine in us. Homes will no longer require locks. Communities will be able to disband the police. Nations will discard the military. There will be no fear, no hate, no violence. Even death will no longer exist. You know, the word shalom, we translate it as peace, correct? Shalom is peace. But it's a different peace than we know of. The peace we know of and the way we define peace is the absence of war or the absence of violence. And we achieve that by having bigger guns than the other person, right? But shalom means you won't even need to think about it. People won't even think these things. There's no need for police or military because people go, what are those things? I mean, that's almost incomprehensible, but that's what John says God wants, God seeks. No fear, no hate, no violence. Even death is gone. And the tree of life, if you're familiar with Genesis and the creation, chapter 2, you know that what got Adam and Eve in trouble was they ate the fruit from the tree of life, which was the knowledge of good and evil. And as they are expelled from paradise, God removes the tree of life from creation. But in Genesis, John tells us that tree is brought back. The tree of life is brought back, and the knowledge of good and evil will no longer be a problem. People will just know. You see, John gives us in Revelation a portrait of humanity in creation that through everything comes full circle. It's all the way around. It is the same yet better. It is good. No, it's now perfect. And those of you who are cynics, and I can be in that crowd too at times, you may be thinking, okay, Keith, nice story, let's move on. And a lot of society has. Yeah, that's never going to happen. You can preach it all you want. I know people. I know my neighbor. I watch television. I see. But here's the thing. If we buy into that, it's never going to happen. It's just useless to think about, just a waste of time. Where does that take us? where does that take us? If you don't have hope, if you don't believe in more, if you don't believe in better, even though your life is good, why do you get out of bed? You know, what drives us, what motivates us? People get married because they believe in a better life. And if they happen to get divorced, they don't give that hope up. They frequently and most often get married again because that is what motivates them, that hope of something they can't even describe that's beyond them. But it represents a perfection of love, a perfection of life, a celebration of all we are, and letting go of the fear that we have when we are alone, you see? And if we let it go, if we dismiss it, it takes us nowhere. We don't need Easter anymore, that's for sure. Because that's the message of Easter. You know, Easter says that the worst life can throw at you isn't enough to overcome what God gives you. With God, there's always more. There's always a surprise. There's something better waiting just beyond. This is the message. God wins. Good will triumph. And the world will have new life. You know, despite everything, I'm taking a little diversion here, but despite everything we see or read these days, you know, the world really is in better shape than it has been in the past. I mean, I know that Ukraine is on our mind and a lot of other things which cause distress, but if you back it up a little, there are less people in poverty, there are less people starving, there are a lot of other things that we have made progress, and we go forward and backwards, I know, but we build upon the foundations that others left us, and hopefully we build at least a little more on top of it. Hope is what gets us out of bed every day. Hope is what enables us to stand on the shoulders of those who believed and walked here before. It was Abraham Lincoln who once said, "I have always tried to remove a thistle and plant a flower where I thought a flower would grow." It's not a big thing, is it? But when you look at his life, you see it didn't turn out perfect, but you see it was one more step at the right time. I've always tried to remove a thistle and plant a flower where I thought a flower would grow. You know, that's what we're called to do. That's what we're called to be. That's why the church is important. Not to stand in judgment all the time, not to criticize, not to tell everybody what's wrong. We know what's wrong. I mean, I don't need people telling me how stupid I am. I know that. You know, I had, at my last church, man, it's been a long time ago, I had a woman who didn't like me at all. And she had no problems verbalizing that. Anywhere and everywhere. She would come to church, sit right about there, second row, open a book when the sermon started, and start reading. Well, it went on and on. And so I called the pastor relation chair. You know, let's sit down, let's talk, let's figure out what's going on with me. And she told me she didn't like my shoes, she didn't like my car, she went through, she had a whole list of things. And the one she ended with was, "And I know a lot of people smarter than you." I thought, that's the best you can come up with? Because I do too, you know? I know that too. But despite all of that, we get up again. And we hope and we believe and we cast blood, sweat, and tears towards, you know, who doesn't want the world to be better for your kids or your grandkids than it was for you? That's what drives us. That's what motivates us. And that's what the heart of Revelation, God will win. God will win. And we are called to be about that until the time comes when God, not Nero or any other Caesar of this world, rules. I want to close with a prayer that I've probably shared before, but good things bear repeating. A prayer written by Bishop Oscar Romero. He was murdered by gangs in El Salvador a few years back as he refused to back down in his message. And he writes this prayer. Romero says, "It helps now and then to step back and to take a long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is beyond our vision. Because we accomplish in our lifetime only a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work. You see, nothing we do is complete, which is a way of saying that the kingdom always lies beyond us. No statement says all that could be said. No prayer fully expresses our faith. No confession brings perfection. No pastoral visit brings wholeness. No program accomplishes and completes the church's mission. No set of goals and objectives includes everything. So instead, this is what we should be about. We plant the seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds that have already been planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces effects far beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of freedom in acknowledging this, because when we do, it enables us to do something and to do that something very, very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and to do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. I love that. That is the difference between the master builder and the worker. And we need to remember that we are workers, not master builders. We are ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future that is not our own. Wow. I couldn't say it better than that. Amen. At this time, we're going to do for the second time something we haven't done in a long, long time. We're going to take an offering. So, if you are so inclined as the ushers pass the plates down the pews, we welcome anything that you might give to our ministry.